activity. And this is a very important realization and recognition. Because you see, we talk in this teaching program, we talk oversimplistically. One has to convey an idea. But then having gotten that simple-minded, fundamental, schematic recognition, then you have to put into it what you actually see in the actual bodies. We have no bad scoliotic in this group, do we? Jerry's the worst we have. I'm looking for a different type. Well, we've been fairly fortunate in this group anyway in having a very great variety of problems come up and great variety of structures showing up. Anyway, now we have come to the place where we have prepared those bodies, and at the end of the 7th hour you saw a good deal of putting bodies together taking place. Now I call to your attention one very important point in that 7th hour, which I noticed some of you are missing in terms of your practice of it. And that is that it is in the 7th hour that you really take a good look at the trapezius muscle, which is, after all, one of the most important muscles in the body, structurally speaking. And you try to get it organized. And you do this by getting this guy sitting down on the floor. And the sitting down on the floor is important for two reasons. One is so that you can really get on top of his shoulders, which you cannot very well as he sits on a chair. It's too high for you, except those of you that are very tall. But the other reason is that you see, when he sits on the floor, his lumbars are necessarily back, where you can demand the spanning necessary to organize the cervicals. Is there anybody that hasn't heard what I said? So you do not go back to the business of his sitting on the chair and you're taking your elbows and going down his back. This is not what you're after. You are no longer dealing with the rector spini groups. This isn't what you're after in that 7th hour. You are after the trapezius. And the more you look at that trapezius in the various anatomy books, and in a book like Molière, where they put in the picture of the trapezius and don't realize that they're putting it in aberrated, but where you can look at this picture, which they see and they think must be normal because they've seen it so many times, there you can get a real understanding of a trapezius and its function, and what you have to do with it to get it to the place where it is balancing that head with relation to that back. Because until and except as you get a balance between the trapezius and the deep underlying intrinsic muscles, you do not have the kind of head function which you hailed with glee when you looked at the guy turning his head and you said, oh, he's turning on the intrinsic muscles. But before you can get him to turn on those intrinsic muscles, you have got to get that trapezius out of your way. And you get it out of your way by organizing it. And it's a mighty smart thing to also look at the structure right in here, where some of those muscles cross, with funny curves that get stuck. And you've never thought of it that way, but that's the way it is. And you've seen this happen. And you've seen that as I go down here and get some of those funny curves unstuck, the guy then begins again to turn his head by grace of the intrinsic, the little muscles. Now, I do not know what the real function of intrinsic muscles is. Maybe some of you someday will get that far along. I do not know why a body behaves more happily, why a body is as a body happy, when it manages to get the intrinsic muscles into the picture and balances it. But that body is happier. You've all seen it. Now, it is not a question of intrinsic muscles alone. Every once in a great while, somebody walks in, and lo and behold, by virtue of something that's happened to them, they are basically operating on intrinsic muscles. No one was here, no one in this room was present last summer when a girl named Cynthia Allen came up from Los Angeles in a wheelchair, wouldn't take no for an answer. I'd given her at least 12 no's that I wouldn't see her. And finally she was so insistent that I said, well, if you're willing to act as a demonstration model for the class, okay. And she came up in a wheelchair, and she was a good deal less competent than Frank. I don't know if that statement's justified. Anyway, this girl also had been in a wheelchair for 20 years. And she managed to, her problem had come as a result of a virus infection, not polio. But that woman could somehow move her bulk around, and she could do such a thing as wheel herself into the bathroom and take care of her various toilet needs and so forth. And she moved her bulk around exclusively, as far as one could see, on the intrinsic muscles. And the extrinsic muscles were completely flabby, completely flaccid. And I've never seen another person like this girl. Now, for her, the road to recovery lay in getting the extrinsic muscles operation. And this she has done in a period of a year working with Emmett. And as a matter of fact, Emmett got this girl standing inside of 4 hours. Because after we had given her first hour here, I sent her back to Los Angeles and told her to get in touch to work with Emmett, who was in this class at this time and acted as assistant with her work. But you do see this, so that it is not a question of just getting the intrinsic muscles into the picture. It is a question somehow of balancing the intrinsic and the extrinsic systems, the inside and the outside systems, if you want to look at it this way. And again, you see, we have got to go and find relationship and establish relationship. And I'm sure that it is this relationship which then gives people the feeling of well-being and physical happiness. And here again, someday somebody is going to be bright enough to take this and analyze the whole and manage to get energy readings, energy understandings of the different qualities of these systems. If the intrinsic system works on the autonomic system, the autonomic nervous system, and if the extrinsic system works on the central nervous system, one can begin to understand that in order to have balance, you've got to get both of those systems somehow balanced in terms of tonus, in terms of metabolic well-being, etc., etc. And someday someone will come along and in a research project managed to demonstrate what this is. But at this moment, I see nothing but speculation to give you an answer. All you see is that this is the way it works. So, now we get to the 8th hour. And there isn't a thing left for us to do except put it together. And see what we get when we get it put together. And we're still in the rather interesting state of mind where we don't know what we're going to get. But we do know that we've got to do something about this. Now, how about a lineup?
Dr. Rolf, your work on this...
A whole bunch of his friends were in that class, and he came down to visit this class, and he was a pretty important man in the osteopathic group and so forth. And so I was being real sweet to him, and a guy got up as a model. I guess it was one of the first classes. A guy got up as a model, and I had him standing in front of the class, and I said, now, Dr. What was his name? I don't remember. He was a great, big, he was a Stan Kellerman in every sense of the word, except he really had a lot of background, but he was a huge guy, and he was thoroughly sure of himself, very egotistical. And I said, now, doctor, how would you diagnose this man? And he went over him from his head to his foot, and he picked this apart, and he picked that apart, and he picked the other thing apart, and he picked 17 other things apart. And that dish in his, that dish around his thorax, which you call a so-and-so dish, and so forth and so forth. And when he got all through, I said, well, now, thank you, doctor, but I'll tell you the honest truth. If I thought that guy had all that wrong with him, I would charge him at least $50. Now, let's fix it up. So, of course, I did the same thing I did on what's his name yesterday. And all this stuff just straightened itself up. Everybody just roared. And I said, no, the bill's only $25. But this is the point of it. If you really know all those things, when Dick first came back from school, he knew too darn much about what was wrong with these people. And I said, Dick, you mustn't see all that. It's fine that you see it, but you mustn't see it. You've got to take that damn simple-minded recipe and follow it. And then you'll be a processor. And it's true. So go and find out what's wrong with these synapses. But don't take it seriously. Because remember, if you take it too seriously, you're going to have to raise your fee to the point where they're not going to be able to pay. Anyway, let's go back and look at that simple-minded recipe again. I think what we saw here yesterday afternoon, for instance, was important to you people to evaluate. Because, you see, it wasn't an accident that had hit some structure directly and knocked it askew. And it wasn't repaired by going anywhere near the structure that was knocked askew. It was a question which Eddie completely missed of looking to see where the major strain was, not the strain of the symptom. Where was the major strain? And the major strain was down in that spine where the major strain of that fellow has been since he was a 10-year-old or what have you. And there's where you had to go in and start taking out the strain which he had put in by his very inadvised forcings of yoga exercise and yoga breathing. I have a suspicion that some of it came in through yoga exercise as well, which he probably wasn't talking about. And so you look to the major strain. And when something comes in this way, you know you really don't know all about. The guy is telling you the minimum that he thinks he can get away with. And you may be very sure that he's hiding, or trying to hide at least, the things which he knows you told him not to do, or he knows by implication you told him not to do. He's not telling you all this. Would you be if the situation were reversed? So you know all this to begin with. So in that, after all, a structure as a whole is a structure as a whole, and we've agreed that this man is a something which is spanned between that plexus at the base of the spine and the plexus at the top of the spine. The next thing you're going to have to do is look to the spine and see where that spanning is interfered with. And with this man, that spanning was it was just like a wire that had taken and been bent. Well, his spine had been taken and bent before. So, obviously, the thing to do is to repeat what you did before, get it out. But you see, that man had had so much processing that he had all this stuff built in underlying it, and it was very easy to get to. This is why it would have been a grand waste of time to have started on the first hour and moved along. This was all inbuilt in him, because this guy has had certainly 30 hours of work, if not more. He had 10 hours from Jack before he ever came into a class of ours, and then he had 10 hours in that class, and he probably had 10 hours in another class. So that all of that was right in there, and you could call up, and you could go into the organized material and simply ease it off. But sometimes you see it pays very much for you to, now I'm doubling back on my tracks, to understand nervous systems and what they do. What was this guy complaining about in his letter to me, which was quite pathetic in order to get me to get him down here? He was having trouble with his kidneys, and he was reporting frequency of urination as kidney problem, which it might or might not have been. And he was he couldn't adjust anything, and he wasn't interested in his food and so forth. But you see, he wasn't informed enough to realize that what he was talking about was probably simply a distortion of that autonomic nervous system as it lay in front of this twisted spine. And that it wasn't that he was having a general breakdown at all. He was having an interference with that autonomic nervous system. Now, if he had been able to put his problem into as objective words as this, he would have saved himself a lot of sweat. But on the other hand, maybe he wouldn't have written me as pathetic a letter, and maybe I wouldn't have invited him down here and told him to come down and fix him up. So, pay your money if you think it's folks. But I do tell you, don't think that you're going to be a better processor by knowing too much neurology, particularly neurology. How on earth we're ever going to get ourselves to the place where we are able to rewrite the books so that the emphasis is where we see it, I don't know. But this is what's going to have to be done. Now, anyway, we're doing 8th hours today, lots of 8th hours. Yesterday, for some reason or another, everybody was worked on in terms of the lower half of the body. And when I looked at those people, I didn't think that this was what was indicated. I felt that what was indicated for Fritz yesterday definitely wasn't indicated for Bill. But you see, we got so balled up with too many people in here at the same time that we just were plowing through. I don't think either Fritz or Bill is going to die of it. But what I'm hoping will come up today will be some of these people, and we don't, how many 8th hours do we really have today?
6, counting Bob. No. 4.
No, 4.
We do have 4 who?
George and Bob.
Dale.
And Dale.
George and Bob.
Dale and Gigi.
Bob isn't up to an 8th hour.
Bob. Driver.
Oh, yeah.
What, isn't Betty up?
No, she's just 2 behind.
She's the second group behind. So that no matter how we slice it, we're not going to get Gigi's 2 behind 2, isn't she?
No, she's
up.
She's getting an 8.
Gigi has never been quite as clear a picture as some of the other people. I think because of her slight, it's all in there, but it isn't unscored with red and green ink, you know, the way it is on some of these people. Anyway, I hope that out of those 4, we get some very clear picture of the need for upper half work rather than lower half work. Now you see what you are developing. What you are developing is something which in earlier classes I haven't really pointed out as early as this, and yet in the pattern in which we have verbally and logically developed it. It is interesting at this point to look at this. What you have developed, you see, is a nervous system spanning. All right. We just were talking about that, from the coccyx to the big ganglion of the brain. But a man doesn't do his living through his nervous system. He does a lot of it through his motor system. So that you have this core structure, but his motor system is wrapped around it in terms of 2 girdles. This is his doing system. And before you have that man the way you want that man, you have to establish a balance between that being system and that doing system. And it is a matter of everlasting interest to me to see how, at the different periods in the world's history, the history of cultural thinking, you see the same ideas coming up, expressed somewhat differently in terms of the cultural pictures of the time. But they never get much beyond it, and they never get much below it. And for 3,000 years, people, or many, or perhaps 10,000 for all I know, people have been talking about the difference between being and doing. And in their religious and philosophical systems, they've been talking about it, and some of them have been trying to develop it. Now, for the most part, what they've been trying to develop has been the being system. All this meditation and so forth has been a development of the being system. They have seemingly felt their lack in that being system rather than in the doing system. On the other hand, you come along to this 20th century, and undoubtedly this was also true in the Middle Ages, where the man who was the greatest knight was not the guy that could think, but the guy that could do, the guy that was more expert in terms of his motor system. And so they were trying at that point to develop a being system through the beglamoring that they put around the being system and the sentiment and so forth, and trying to detract from the motor system. And now we get up to the 20th century, and we go along and look on the bookstand and find the body beautiful. And there's very little being in it. It's a doing system. And you see they have managed to overstress that doing until they get an absolutely immobilized organization. And those guys that you see on that Body Beautiful are good for very little work. Put them out to mow the lawn for an hour, and they can't work for a week. And if any of you have happened to be anywhere around where prize fighters were training, you see the same sort of thing. So at 7 o'clock they're out on the road, and they run just so and so many feet. And then they come home, and then they rest. And they lie down on their back, and somebody serves them some breakfast and so forth. And then at 11 o'clock they take on their sparring partner, and they do it for just that long, and they rest. And they can't do a day's work. It's very important that you recognize that these various systems in a body have to be developed in order to get efficient, happy living. Happy in terms of body living. And so this is what you have been developing. And now you see, you are going to look at this in terms of relating those motor systems. No longer are you really basically looking at it in terms of gravitational structure per se. You're looking at it in terms of a doing system in terms of gravitational structure. You're looking at it in terms of the two girdles, which are the doing systems of that body, and relating them. And one after the other of you yesterday fell kind of flat on your face because you see you were still back trying to take out the little knots and things that kept the body from standing straight. And this isn't the job anymore. The job now is to relate the working system to the working system. And this relates through fascial planes. Big fascial planes. And your 8th and your 9th and your 10th hours will be dealing basically with the fascial planes and how to relate them. And you don't relate a fascial plane by putting your little finger in, your little index finger, and pushing. You've got to deal with a fascial plane with a wide spread and a widespread stretch. And it's a different feeling, and it's a different it's a different feeling objectively, but it's a different feeling subjectively. To you, the feeling under your hand is different. And you've got to feel and think of yourself as relating big structures to big structures. Now, in order to do this, your big structures have to be free, relatively free. For example, you are not going to be able to relate a shoulder girdle to a spine if the individual elements that determine the position of the shoulder girdle, one or two of them, are out of place. A teres, a subscapularis, a levator scapulae. You see, you can't relate past that. But you've got to do more than free the teres or free the levator or free this, that, and the other thing. Having freed them, you've got to relate them. And this is the job of the 8th hour. Now, go down to the other end of the line. What is the big thing that's relating the legs? My goodness, such carnage.
Enjoy every moment.
Still alive. Nobody's gotten him yet. It's two out of 3 for the fly so far.
Let's have some time out so we can really enjoy the carnival.
Boy, he's dead. She's a big one too, greedy.
I don't want to hit the sun.
Yeah, hit the sun.
Icarus.
Boy, I think of a bad karma from that.
What's going to happen to the guy that first shot the moon?
The guy that first walked on the moon?
Not the walk on the moon, but the first shot of the moon, which was about 3 years ago now, 4
when
years
they
ago.
impacted the capsule.
So at any rate, yesterday, practically
That's
all
heavy.
of you. Hey, how about you fellas? Carry on with your play, or I'll carry on with my play. Who's going to play the best game? Anyway, you've got this problem of relating the motor function of the lower girdle in there, or at least that's what we were trying to deal with yesterday. Now just see the different way you got to look at the thing before you're going to do that. You're going to have the feeling of the leg being a leg as a whole. Now what creates a leg as a whole and what interferes with a leg as a whole? And they're really the same structures you've been dealing with, only it's that cockeyed subtlety of a difference in the way of looking at it, giving rise to a difference in the result that you're getting from it. Anybody like to express his confusion at this point with a question? It might help to lead the discussion further. Or aren't you confused?
I'm so confused I haven't even got a question.
I'm confused about what you mean by large fascial planes as opposed to...
Small fascial planes. Yeah. Small fascial planes will be the wrappings of the individual muscles.
Mm-hmm.
But those large fascial planes, look for instance at what you've got in here.
Mm-hmm.
And look for instance at what you've got where the leg joins and see the extent in which the fascia connects with the fascia.
Mm-hmm.
So that here you're really dealing with a structure which in your own mind is a fascial structure rather than a muscular structure.
Mm-hmm.
Is this clear at all? Or?
You're dealing with groups of muscles that are...
Yes.
Yes, you're dealing with groups of muscles, but if you could just take the muscle out of the picture at this point, seeing the fascia as a single structure, was it in that Spalterholz that there was that good structure, fascia of the shoulders picture?
Yeah, I know that.
You see what I'm talking about at this point?
Yesterday when we were just about through with Don, he looked real good from the waist down, but the waist, the whole bottom didn't fit with the top half. And you did a few things around his pack, and it fit all of a sudden. That's confusing.
You see, we have one very great weakness in this group. We are used to being able to verbalize, and it is this, and that it is that. And it just ain't that. And life ain't that. Life ain't an it is thing. Life is this relationship. And we're not used to using our words in a way that conveys the idea of relationship to the other guy. And so we are fighting to do something which hasn't been done before, and it takes us a while to do it. And I don't know what I did with Don yesterday.
You know, it might help if we all learn Hopi Indian language. Because that's a language of relationships. Very different from
There are a lot of languages of relationship in the world. That is several of them. And it makes a very great difference, and it makes a very great difference as to the actual tension in the individual who's speaking the language. If you say the cat runs, inside of you something tightens and runs. You're not just sitting just as you were before. If you say the running cat, nothing bothers to tighten. And there are many, many languages which do not say the cat runs, Oriental languages, but which picture the cat, the running cat.
There was
Makes a big difference inside of the individual who's talking about it.
There was a study about 10 years ago which studied the 5 relating kinds of languages, Hopi being one of them. And in none of the people who speak those languages are there either juvenile delinquency or obese people.
Well, that seems a pretty wide deduction to make.
That was by factor analysis.
Okay, I believe you. But you see, it's important that you know that this is so. I don't know that you can do a darn thing about it. The actual number of papers, or the actual amount of information that's known about it isn't that great as far as I know. I think some of this, what was the name of that man that was General Semantics, branched off from General Semantics and looked into this? He was a man who was, if I remember rightly, a railroad dispatcher.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Hey, Kyle.
No.
Benjamin Ward, wasn't it?
Should have been.
Benjamin
Wolf,
Ward,
yeah,
yes.
right,
Uh-huh.
Wolf. And I don't know why, but nobody seemed to pick up the ball and take it much further. And Wolf had given it his original kick, and it carried just that far, and then it didn't go
A
further.
man by the name of Morris tried to go from Worf's thesis and make it more specific with the English language, but really got bogged up. He wrote a couple of books about it, but nothing very clear.
I think that was the thing, that war scared everybody so much that they couldn't handle it, and everyone wanted to find specific cases, and nobody bothered to carry his thinking on.
Well, the problem was that there aren't that many people alive in the world that know the grammatical formulations of these various languages, let alone the comparative formulation.
How do you spell his last name, Bill?
W-H-O-R-F.
Yeah, that's Benjamin.
Benjamin Lee.
And I don't even remember where that was published. Do you?
He had two books out. I was trying to think of...
The original.
one of them has to do with structure of language. And they're both available in paperback.
Okay.
Yes.
It seems to me I must have read that originally in some of the General Semantics publications.
Well, the etc. printed a number of his excerpts from his books and also a lot of comments about him by other people.
Well, at any rate, if any of you are interested, look at it. But realize that it's a very simple thing to look at a body as being a summation of individual parts. But if you really look at the fact that if you say the cat runs very deeply in your body, and you tighten up and you change the relation of those parts in your body, you get a different recognition of what is a body. And it's going to take you a lot of sitting in a corner and meditating before you find out where this stops. I question that you're going to find out. But in terms of your question, you see, if you look at a structure like that, and you're going to change a structure like that, you're not going to get into individual muscle stuff. Now, over and over again, you people come here, and you do a job, and you say, is this okay? And I say, no, it doesn't pass. And I go over, and with a punch here and a punch there, it changes. But that punch here and that punch there is always a question of going to a greater depth. And you people are dealing, you're still dealing, not with this kind of fascial structure. You're still playing in the muscular pattern that is around the real core of the body. Now, I don't know where this cat runs thing goes to in you. I mean, I don't really know the depth. When I feel for what happens in myself when I say the cat runs, I feel myself tightening through the abdomen. I don't know how, in terms of this picture that I'm trying to draw, what is the depth to which this consistent use of language causes change. And after you realize all this, then you begin to realize what some of these religious people have been driving at when they talk about the importance of the individual words and how you use them. The importance of blasphemy, the importance of taking the name of the Lord in vain, and this sort of thing. The importance of anger and expressing yourself in anger versus the suppression of anger and the expression of it as a more or less devoid material that has been devoid of its emotional impact. There's a great deal in there. I don't know what it is. I don't feel that it's my business to try to deal with it, but I do feel that it's your business to recognize that this is there. You know, the people that come to you are always asking you, well, Doc, what's this from? Why is this? Why do I have this? And you can't tell them this. They can't understand even if you spell it out ABC for them. They're not living in this fourth area, and you can't talk to them. You have to have something that you're telling them in terms of the second area or the early third area, and then they go away and they're satisfied that they know what's going on. But they don't know because this nowadays living somehow is in that fourth area, whether they see it or not. It would be interesting to speculate, and never to find out, whether in the days of primitive life on the earth, there was a difference in livingness that said we live in an area where it is to me, therefore it is, and this is the reality. Have fun. But realize that you cannot put your finger on something and say, this is it. This isn't it. This may be part of the picture of it. That's as close as you can get to it. And this statement that I've just made is of importance to you here, because it is in the 8th hour and the 9th hour and the 10th hour that you are now dealing with relationships. And what I expect to be seeing today, as you get into your models practice, I expect to be literally seeing your minds working in terms of how do I relate this to this, instead of what causes this. And it isn't going to be that easy a day. I mean, that's simple-minded today.
What do you think of doing the 8th hour with your eyes closed, blindfolded?
It wouldn't be hard.
But it is, to a very large extent, a matter of feeling.
Your eyes are an organ of feeling.
Yeah.
It's only that your eyes are so lucky. They do that feeling at a distance.
But I see your hands go to the fascial space and go along the fascial spaces.
Mm-hmm. And?
Well, that's just the way you do it. You go right to the fascial space and you feel your way along the fascial space.
Sure. So.
Rather than identifying and say, this is this and this is this and this is this.
Well,
it tells you where you're going.
Neither I nor anybody that's really good at anything does it. This is this stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
As they become paid for teaching other people, they look around and try to find some words which rationalizes what they do. Now, you're a big boy and you know this is so. But you don't need to tell that to the children, or we'll all stop having our salaries paid. But this is really so. There's such a tremendous split in what's going on here between what we're doing and what we're saying.
You want to talk about strength?
Oh, yeah, right. Anybody want to answer the question, what is strength? I made a mistake yesterday. I mean, I should have asked you to have tested his grip after I did what I did. I made a mistake. I apologize. Does anybody want to answer that question of what is strength?
Well, as I've learned it, strength is a matter of form, and then it's a matter of balance.
Go on.
That is to say that strength is not a matter of, as popularly thought of, mass of muscles, size of muscles. Rather, what it is it's the correct performance of the muscle groups, one muscle group following another muscle group. And also, it's a matter of balance. That is that when a motion is done, when force is exerted in one direction, there should be a force going in an opposite direction.
It's a matter of balance.
Right.
That's right.
For instance, let me give an example. For instance, in karate, the strength of the kick depends on the balance of your balance on the supporting leg, not so much on the leg that does the kicking.
You know, there'd be a whole area that would be very interesting when you looked into karate in terms of our way of organizing, forming a body. Because karate per se and judo per se don't give the type of bodies that we create.
That's right. Yeah, I can see that now.
You not only can see it, you felt your own body change in the last 2 weeks. And I don't know how you feel about the change that you've gotten, whether it pleases you more or it pleases you less. It does please you more?
There's no doubt about it.
Well, this is a very interesting statement, and you see, Feldenkrais had the same thing to say. What he wanted was not that roundness of judo, but the ovoidness of Rolf.
What about Aikido?
I don't know as much about that, but all of those Oriental forms create roundness, as far as I know.
I don't think Aikido does as much.
It does.
Well, I don't really know. You people talk about it that know something about it. All I know is that you take Bob's body about the second or third hour that we work the body. Now, some of you that are interested in different aspects of body, this would be a very interesting line to follow. Maybe you want to follow it. What constitutes that Oriental flow versus the kind of flow that we have here? You see, I think, but this is pure speculation on my part, I think that if there is a plan which is much greater than what we can observe in terms of our little lives and our little living, if there is a plan for these various games to be played out, one culture plays out its kind of game and one culture plays out its kind of game, then what you are seeing in this room is the unfolding of that plan for a different kind of game, a kind of game that is played with lightness. And maybe this is the Aquarian age of this culture, this light business that plays with light balance and not massive strength. I don't know, but it's an interesting speculation.
That's the goal of Tai Chi, is the lightness and balance.
Yeah, that's the theory. You go look at some of them. And not the good ones.
Yeah.
But the point is that there's a vast gap between the theory and the translation into it. But you see, basically all the masters in any of these things are very close together. The performance of masters. I don't care what field you're a master in, you won't be that far out from the masters in any other field. It goes in like this. The people that are at the head are in a very small circle. But getting back to very mundane considerations of strength. The fellow on the other end of the telephone says, I've been down with a dose of flu, and I'm as weak as a kitten. I can just manage to get to the bathroom. That's all I can do. And I've got to get to my office because I have to sign a contract. And he says, what'll I do about it? And you say, well, just stay where you are for a while. In the goodness of your heart, you pick up. And you go over and see the guy. And he looks like the wrath of God was on him. His face doesn't look the same. His arms don't look the same. Nothing looks the same. And he is, as he says, as weak as a kitten. I don't know how weak a kitten is. Some of them are pretty sturdy looking to me. But there he is. Now look what's happened. His form has been destroyed through this invasion of a virus or what have you. And I don't think any of you have ever really sat down and thought about this. His form has been destroyed. His face is swollen. His tissues are holding water. Maybe his tissues are holding water locally rather than generally, or maybe the other way around. The relationship of part to part has been violated. And the guy says, I'm sick. And he is sick. But this is sickness, among other things. If you go in there and you look at the chemistry of it, the chemical balance has been destroyed. And the guy in the laboratory doesn't need to see this fellow lying here with his form destroyed. If you just bring him a little bit of blood, he'll say, well, this is a sick man you've got there. So that his chemical form has been destroyed. But always it's a destruction of form. Now you take your hands, and with your hands you restore the form, and now you have a brand new problem on hand. Now you can't keep the guy down. He's got to go to his office and raise hell generally. And you can't keep the guy down, but you know that he isn't that fixed and sturdy yet, and that unless you keep him down and give him time for this new thing to gel again, you've got some more trouble. But he's no longer as weak as a kitten. Then he gives you a story about he's so weak, and you say, what have you been eating? Well, I've been so weak, you know, I thought I'd better have a beef steak because that would give me strength. So you go on, and with your hands you restore the form. And then he's able to get up and jump around. And he pulls on his clothes and he grabs a taxi and he goes down to the office. And you say, but you didn't have any beef steak. How did you happen to get so strong all at once? And now you got the guy completely confused, and he better get down to his office in an area where he's not confused. But it behooves you people to see this. The extent to which you can restore the form, you restore the ability of the guy to function. Now, of course, there comes a time in the destruction of any given form who's known as John Smith or Mary Jones, when the destruction of the form goes to the point beyond which the point of no return. But until you get to that point, the restoration of the form gives you life again. And once again, you can look at it in terms of you add energy to a mess where the entropy has gone high, and the entropy, the disorder, decreases. And the order and the ability and the capability of the guy is restored. See, it's the same story that you talk about in mathematics, about the increase of entropy if you just let a system alone.
If we have time, I would like to have Peter give us a few minutes dissertation on the concept of entropy. Would you do that, Peter? It's a concept that I don't have a good solid grab on. I'd like to hear it again.
Well, if he's going to give a good dissertation, get it down and publish it.
That's right.
Publish it in the bulletin, because a lot of people are...
Just something that it might be better to think about a little bit before I say something.
All right, well, think about it between now and Monday morning, Peter. And think of it in terms of something that we can use to talk about, that we can publish so that other people don't get, others of our group don't get so scared by this word entropy. And if you're going to really do a good job, try to convert try to bridge between this concept of entropy and the law of thermodynamics, which they've all heard about, and the minute you mention it, they all withdraw because they're scared to death. Try to make them more familiar so that we don't get this withdrawal. I told you probably that one of the criticisms, and I must get that paper from Al, one of the criticisms that was sent back from the editorial department to whom I submitted this discussion of stress was that they wanted more of a discussion of this entropy thing.
Yeah.
And you see, if you think about this between now and Monday, maybe out of it we can get 3 sentences that'll make them happier.
That was where I got hung up in that paper I was working on, too, this concept of entropy.
Well, you see, this is what I mean when I say the day is very near when we cannot possibly any longer try to teach this in terms of 6 weeks, 24 days of sessions. When we have got to realize that what we are doing here works out into all, many, many, many departments, into every direction, that we are just simply a key core situation here. And we are going to have to expand to a point point where we have organization of ideas, much wider level.
If I were to set up a training program for Rolf practitioners, I would demand a year's dedication to start with.
This has got to be, but believe me, you wouldn't be sitting in this room right now if I had demanded it.
You notice I started my sentence with if.
Well, I figured that out 10 years ago. But I'm a realist if ever there was one. And I know that where you're going to go on a walk, you've got to start putting your foot one foot ahead of the other from there where you're standing.
Which way?
Shut up, Aristotle.
Do it once. Yeah.
Just finishing several years of training in classical, several years to learn a study. I'm very much opposed to the idea of institutionalizing something to the point where you destroy the creative.
Well, all of this is fine theory. We all would bow down to it, and we all know that except as you create a form, you can't convey the thing. You have got to have form. As long as you're living on the face of the earth, you've got to have form. Now, how rigid that form is, there's a certain amount of freedom in the degree of rigidity. But form you have to have. That's the law of the prophets as far as they've been revealed to me. Do we have any coffee? No.
About the backdrops, but they didn't do that. You mean need that, right?
That's it.
That's the big thing that was
They didn't bring it. Well, I'm sure she'll call today. Check up on us. Stay down.
Do I thank God for somebody that really looks after me and sees that I'm doing a good job? What I just wonder is how I ever got here without Giovanna to guide my first 7 years. Okay. Now, let's just for fun do a little different type of reviewing than what we've been doing. Let's, in our mind's eye, go back to the first hour.
about the backdrops, but they didn't do that. You mean need that, right?
That's it.
That's the big thing that was approved.
They didn't bring it. Well, I'm sure she'll call today. Check up on us. Stay down.
Do I thank God for somebody that really looks after me and sees that I'm doing a good job? What I just wonder is how I ever got here without Giovanna to guide my first 7 years. Okay. Now, let's just for fun do a little different type of reviewing than what we've been doing. Let's, in our mind's eye, go back to the first hour and to the randomness of the first hour and to the randomness of bodies. I walked out of my, you don't need to be reminded of this, but maybe, I walked out of my bedroom into the living room a little while ago, and Mike was phoning. That was Mike. Mike has had his first hour, his second, his third, his fourth. But visualize that randomness and what causes it and how it manifests. Owen, do you want to say anything about what you think about that on that topic sentence?
I see in some cases that the randomness is well, I wonder two things. I see in one case that it is a lack of education in the part of the person to realize a level that they are being
put into with their own help. That is, at the end of 10 hours, there is a certain amount of understanding of education of line and structure that is taught.
Well, this is true, but at the end of properly given 10 hours, they don't need that education.
Exactly,
You
it
can
should
take a
be there.
4-year-old and it'll be
It should
there.
be there.
That's right.
The other day what struck me, I saw Malcolm down at the hot baths, or down at Esalen, and Malcolm has a desire, whatever his need is, to go around like this, and I know he can stand like this.
I know, too.
Now, there...
I know Owen can sit with his feet ahead, too, but look at them. Okay.
And so there's more to it than just placement.
Meets the eye, right.
And so this sitting, as Michael was sitting, was more than just 4 hours of structure work. I don't know quite how to tie this up. I mean, it's, in my mind, still a little dilemma.
Would you like to tie it up, Bill?
I have some ideas, but I'm not...
Well, break them out. We
Okay.
need to look at this.
To me, it's all tied together in this mind-body duality that we get seduced into. And I think we get in a psychological set for some reason. And I don't think it matters what the reason is that we're there. But we make it possible for a person to get out. We're not forcing them into a better operating position, but we're making it possible for them to go in this better operating position. And there are all kind of things spinning around, and it hasn't organized itself, or I haven't organized it.
I know. Well, this could be a valuable hour in the sense that each of you try to organize what you feel around here rather than my taking it on and organizing. You all know the difference between my talking at you and your talking to me.
Well, for me, a case I've been watching very closely is Misty, my daughter. And when she starts talking about romping or structural integration, she gets in the proper position. But if you catch her looking out the window or something, she's going to be not where she was, but
all right.
back on the
Why
floor.
will she be there?
I think in her case, it's a lack of motivation. She hasn't really been that soul.
I suspect that in her case and most other cases, it is what most of you would call habit. And I say that there is really no such thing as habit, just like there ain't no psychology. Habit is doing the thing the way it is easy to you. And the way the thing is easy to you is determined by what is going on in the muscles, in the joints, in the tendons, in the connective tissue. Now, when Misty really thinks about it and straightens herself up, I think this is her motivation of getting herself past the bond, which isn't that badly fixed yet in Misty, of the shortenings that produce that pattern. But I think that if the pattern is set, and some of you here know it, and more of you here will know it, if the pattern is set, you don't fall back below that line. In all of these bodies, there is a level to which you have climbed and below which you will not fall back. Many of the people in this room remembered how Dale sat 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. Far worse than Mike was able to, could under any circumstances have produced, probably ever. Because the inside core of that man was so organized that this was the only way his body was easy, and it wasn't easy there. Now, had we been watching Mike closely enough, I know that as of this morning, his worst sprawl could not have equaled what he would have given 3 weeks ago, before he started. You all see what I'm trying to say. This word habit is one of the devils that there will be shortly in your life. Because all your patients are going to say, yes, doctor, I know, but this has been my habit for so long that I can't change it. And whether you want to talk to them about this or whether you don't want to talk to them about this, realize that when they say, this has been my habit, and I can't change my habit that easily, that what they're really saying is, this has been the level of relationship of the internal structures in my body. So that there isn't a thing properly called habit. There is the outward and visible sign of the internal relationship, which is most easy for you to get into. Most simple. So it is from this level of randomness that you are going to build in the first hour with a pattern. Hey Fritz, you always sit over in that corner and I never see you, and you just get away with murder around here. Do you want to sketch in the most vital places to start the change of that randomness?
The change of the randomness. I think is partially you're talking in changing of the awareness of the person, and from the structural integration position by beginning with the superficial fascia. You begin to change the body image, the body awareness almost, and by freeing the body from the sense of the shoulder girdles, and the pelvic girdle from the central core of the body. Again, this changes the person's awareness of...
Well, now you're talking about in 10 hours, aren't you?
I'm thinking overall.
But I was thinking it, well,
specifically?
What you're saying was all right, provided you specify that you're thinking of an overall
I'm thinking
pattern.
overall.
But I am trying to get you to look at hour by hour without looking at it in the same, from the same vantage point that we've been looking at it.
Okay, the hour, you begin on the superficial fascia, and you begin on the upper portion of the body. In relating this in a better position to the gravitational field. I'm trying to say too much. In the second hour, you're dealing with the lower extremities to again begin to organize these structures to fit under the
Pelvis that you're trying to horizontal.
Right.
Okay.
The third hour deals with lengthening. We're always dealing with lengthening the body. This is in the back of our minds at all times. Third hour is dealing with the lengthening of the sides of the trunk, again to free the pelvis so we can horizontalize it. The fourth, fifth, and sixth hours. Fourth hour, again, is dealing with the pelvis from below and lengthening the midline of the body.
In this, to the extent that this can be done from below the pelvis.
Right, right. Each hour is just approaching this from one vantage point.
That's right.
And it has to build. The fifth hour, again, is dealing with the pelvis from above, from the rectus to lengthen the upper portion of the body. The sixth hour, again, is dealing with the pelvis and is dealing with freeing the rotators and horizontalizing the pelvis and working more specifically on the relationship of the sacrum to the pelvis in its horizontalization.
All of this is true, but now let's take another look at it and realize that in the first hour you have gone to the diaphragm, not specifically, but to the fascia that is determining diaphragmatic posturing. And you've organized it, and you've gone to the psoas. See, always you have this polarity going on between the diaphragm and the psoas. That's what keeps the body upright. That's what keeps a trunk organized. This relation between the diaphragm and the psoas. And when you come right down to it, that pelvic lift, every time you come to it, is relating the psoas to the diaphragm. Through the lumbars, through the sacrum, etc., etc. But one of the things I'm trying to emphasize here is a relative simplicity when you come right down to it as to what goes structurally wrong with the body. If you can organize psoas and diaphragm, you've got it made. The only problem is, what specific approaches do you need to relate these two ends of the poles, these two polar ends of the structure? Now, let's look at this again, a little more specifically. Fritz, how do you know when a first hour has been given? For example, you were in here, all of you people that were in the last class, you were in when Mr. James came in, and I said, give him a first hour to somebody or other, Hector, I guess it was. And somebody said, but he has had a first hour. And I said, but he hasn't had a first hour. Now, I'm not throwing rotten tomatoes at Peter's first hour. Peter couldn't get in there, and God knows it was all I could do to get in there. I am calling your attention to the fact that you can know when a first hour has been given. How?
Seems to me
not whether somebody has tried to dig his hands in there, but whether a first hour has been given.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the relationship of the anterior chest cage with the back, and you see a lengthening here, and you see a relative shortening of the back.
Yeah, there's something more significant than that. That can be simulated. It was particularly apparent in Mr. James.
You see the general raising of the chest and the raising of the diaphragm.
Yeah, but one of the things was that Mr. James was made of wood, solid, just absolutely solid, and there were no joints in the man. Yeah, he could move his arms, and more or less. He could move his legs, but not very much. But there wasn't a single spinal joint working in that man. And as you looked at him trying to breathe, you couldn't see any movement of those ribs. Now, if you can't see all of this happening, you just haven't seen a first hour, period. There should be movement all the way through that spine by the time you're through. There should be movement of the diaphragm. As you give a pelvic lift, the belly wall should at least show you that it knows it should be falling back, even if it can't make the grade. And that amount of movement should get in there in that first hour. You see, there are lots of different ways of looking at a body, and I'm trying to give you, I'm trying to go all the way around this phenomenon and let you look at it from several places. You have already looked at the fact that the front has lengthened more than the back. This is true. This is almost more of an index for a second hour than it is the completion of the first hour, as you know. But movement should get into that body, and the movement should be appropriate in terms of these patterns. You begin to see movement of the psoas, which means that the recti will fall back, the belly wall will fall back as you call for a pelvic lift. And the chest will be moving differently. The rib cage that you can see through the chest wall will be moving differently from what it was in the beginning. And this rigidity and insecurity almost that's boasted by the rigidity of that upper chest should be falling away. Now you see the guy is still going to be random because there will be these various knottings deep in which make it easier for him to sit this way than to sit this way. Okay, but you can see that this rigidity has been disturbed. And in the second hour, as you lengthen that back, you are still further disturbing the rigidity. And as you are doing the feet, you are further disturbing the rigidity of the trunk, as you all saw. And you are putting length in. And in all these earlier hours, what you are seeing is the need for a generalized length. And in the third hour, you're still working with that length. And you're still working with the lengthening of the side, and now you are beginning to go in to get the rigid holdings, you see, at a deeper level, through the quadratus. So here at the end of the second hour, you have a milestone that says, yes, this guy has had his second hour. And on that milestone, it talks about the feet. It talks about the extent to which the ankles have been horizontal. It talks about the extent to which the external malleolus is no longer dragging in the dust. It talks about where are the knees. Do you remember, all of you, the look of Malcolm as he came in here with respect to his legs and his knees? What a perfectly ghastly walk. You wondered how he could support his trunk on those cockeyed legs, but God knows the world is full of them. And by the end of the second hour, those legs were talking to you and saying to you, well, we are seeing a light. And you were getting some movement in the back, and you weren't getting any movement in his chest still. Oh, you were getting more movement than would have been there before the first hour, which we didn't see at all. And then in that third hour, you're going up and you're again trying to relate those same old two things, the diaphragm and the psoas. And you're recognizing the amount of tie-up that there is in that diaphragm that deals with the length of the sides, that is anchored by the length of the sides. You can't get the diaphragm where you want the diaphragm until you have length enough in the sides to stick that thing in where it belongs. And the diaphragm, after all, attaches down as far as the second lumbar. So you see, one of the things you've got to do is to start getting those lumbars back in order to give yourself the place where the diaphragm can fit. And as this guy gets up from the third hour, you look at him and you say, that anterior superior spine is really in a mess. If I come back and try to do a fourth hour with that anterior superior spine caught up like this, I'm going to have trouble. And perhaps you prepare it some for that fourth hour. Because you see, you can't get the pelvis turned up. You can't get the psoas back where it can play back and forth with that diaphragm until such time as you have this degree of movement. And that pelvis can be kept tremendously immobilized by those 5 muscles that attach there at the anterior superior spine. I doubt if there's any other one place in the body, maybe the ramus, where in as brief an area you have as much going on in terms of how the body is held. Why? Because you have the sartorius, you have the rectus femoris, you have the gluteus medius. Well, let's erase the gluteus medius for the moment. The sartorius, the rectus femoris, and the fascia lata. You see, here's the whole leg, all hooked right in good and tight to that rectus femoris. And relating that hooking, tying it in, is the gluteus medius at a deeper level, and the iliacus at a still deeper level. And as your iliacus is held, so must your psoas be held, because of the common tendon that they share. Now, is this very apparent to you, the significance of this here? So that you see, this is one of the key points of observation in that third hour. If this is all hooked up and hooked in, you're not going to be able to run a good fourth hour. This is all hooked up and hooked in. It says to you.
Your daughter-in-law.
Who?
Ridgewood, that dick?
Yes. Ask her if it's possible for me to call her back at the end of an hour and a half. It's absolutely impossible for you to be able to organize your pelvis, to be able to get the relation between the psoas and the iliacus and the diaphragm. So that the looks of that anterior superior spine is your key, is a key as to how well you have done your job in that third hour. And you see, each one of these hours, if you are sufficiently familiar, will have these very specific and so then, to the extent that you get this little band across here freed, you are more aware of the hooking down of the fourth hour through the adductor group. And you can just look at those legs in your mind's eye, and you can see the muscles that you've handled in the third hour. I stressed them just now. The sartorius, the rectus femoris, and the fascia lata, of course, the tensor. And you can see how the next thing to do is to go down to the slightly deeper level, and all those adductors are really a little more central. So then you come on further. And you go into that next level. You have started to free the psoas. To free the psoas, not to place the psoas. That original pelvic lift, you see, was placing the psoas as best you might at that level. And always pelvic lifts are placing the psoas as best you may at the level that you are at the moment. But now you go into the deeper level, which is freeing the pelvis itself, the bony structure itself, to shift enough to give you a different relationship now with respect to the psoas. And your different relationship depends to a large extent on the floor of the pelvis and how well organized it is. And in turn, the floor of the pelvis and the way in which it becomes organized is a function of the adductors. And everything depends on everything else. And so you begin to be freeing that very key muscle, the psoas, and enough of you have been looking around at enough people, under enough circumstances and at enough times, to have seen the ways in which this thing varies, the ways in which half the people that you know, I suspect, have deficient function of the psoas and therefore structure of the psoas. They are not able to reach that psoas. They are not able to control that psoas. And if they don't have the appropriate balancing function of the psoas diaphragm thing is going to be off. How can it be otherwise? So that you have to organize this at this level so that the psoas is going to give you what you need to take on and up and relate it to the diaphragm. And in the fifth hour, you got to doing this. And you got to doing it in terms of the recti, in order, again, to get to the psoas. Shall we arrange a ceasefire?
I think Matt needs another session.
I think Matt needs another session. And you see, in order to change the psoas, you have to change the antagonist of the psoas. I don't know which one is the agonist and which one is the antagonist. I know that Miss Knott says that the one that shortens is the agonist and the one that lengthens is the antagonist. Now, in that framework, which one of these is the agonist? And the answer is that neither of them is. Because both the psoas and the recti are stuck. Neither one of them can lengthen. Both of them have to try to shorten. If you try to do a sit-up, if a relatively random body tries to do a sit-up, everything shortens. The psoas shortens what it can, and the recti shorten more than they can. And that's the pattern of the random body. But the pattern of the body is that if you try to do a sit-up, a flexion across this joint here, the psoas should lengthen and fall back. this is something that nobody believes because nobody's ever seen it, really. They see it once in a while, they say how graceful, etc., etc. But it doesn't occur to them that this is normal movement, that the psoas has got to lengthen and fall back as you flex this joint. And it isn't until you get into that 5th hour that you begin to get to the place where you can really evoke this.
Well, you shut me down with that. How the psoas is lengthening.
Isn't it? Put your hands in here deep.
I can't.
You can't do.
Not today.
You mean those Rolf hands are still in there? You can even feel it that way.
I can dig the falling back, but the lengthening just isn't in my comprehension.
It isn't in my comprehension either. It's in my fingers.
I just can't.
It's in your fingers, and after you've done it, you feel it. And this is all there is to it. I cannot and I will not lie about what my fingers see. Because I know that what we're doing here is something that hasn't been done before, and therefore it's got to be a different phenomenon back of it, and that's the phenomenon. You just hold your fire for a while, you'll see it presently. You saw it.
I agree.
You felt it. You felt it. I thoroughly agree with you. It is not logical. Nobody said it was. Don, I suspect, and this isn't in the anatomy book, I suspect that psoas is hooked back by something else when it's normally organized. It's hooked back, and the something else shortens and pulls it back. And I don't know what it is.
I see.
And I would like to do a little dissection and find out how that works, but I don't know how. It's going to be in that, at the back of that pelvis and that abdomen, and if a surgeon really wanted to know, he'd find out, but...
How about an iliacus?
How about an iliacus? That's not going to bring that psoas back the way your fingers will tell you that it goes back.